Hello, I'm Georgina Rose, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time surfer of the Enochian Aethers, and welcome back to the Dr. Arlene YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss everything related to religion, mysticism, and everything on the fringes of esoterica. And in this video, I will be continuing my Occult 101 series. My Occult 101 series is a series that I have been running for the past 4 years on this channel, where I give beginner introductions to occult topics that you can watch, hear about, and then jump off into further research from. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about something that I think people will find quite useful, and that is self-initiation. So, in the modern age, a lot of occult practitioners are solitary practitioners, or essentially people who are not part of an organized group, such as an order or coven. Most likely, if you're watching this video, you are a solitary practitioner. Now, even if you're not a solitary practitioner, you probably still have some practices that you do when you are not at lodge or in circle, right? Even the most lodge-based occultists should be doing something at home. And for that reason, the personal practice exists. And within the personal practice, it is very common to self-initiate. And self-initiation is viewed very oddly in the occult community because everyone wants to read about it, but there are naysayers who say that self-initiation is not as legitimate as group initiation. And to them, they are wrong. I'm gonna be harsh, okay? I'm gonna not do the whole everything is valid ooh-woo thing that all occult bloggers do. I'm gonna say the truth. Self-initiation is just as legitimate, and people who say self-initiation are not legitimate are probably cult leaders who want you to join their specific order and they claim they are the only ones that have a path to truth. That's not true because anyone can contact the divine. The only thing that can gatekeep the truth is the divine, and if you are gatekept in some other way, you're just falling for messaging, right? Self-initiation is actually how all practices technically began, because to start a tradition or organized practice, right, someone had to have a mystic revelation. If a practice is not based in mystic revelation, what is it, right? All practices are based in mystic revelation, and inherently someone had to do that first, right? In a sense, the most infamous self-initiated story is when Mary was approached by the angel to take Jesus on as her son, right? And then she was initiated into the office that she occupied within the Christian tradition. That was a self-initiation. Now, why am I bringing that in? I know some people will ask questions like, what do you mean a God coming to someone is a self-initiation? Technically, a self-initiation is not literally yourself. A self-initiation is going to a spirit or a spirit coming to you and then engaging with that spirit directly to begin you on a new path. So, okay, let's talk about what initiation is because I feel like that is kind of an important thing. So initiation is the beginning of a path. Many people picture initiation as a very specific thing. They picture it as you go to a lodge and you take specific oaths. And there are many initiations that look like that. In fact, oath-taking is part of all initiations. I'll get to that in a second. Now, you might not always be aware that's what you're doing, but that's typically what you're doing. But initiation is just beginning, right? Initiation is the beginning of a path, right? Initiation is what you do first. And it's very likely if you've been practicing for a while, you actually are initiated, you just don't know the language for it, right? Anytime you have a new revelation, you invoke a god for the first time, all of that are initiations. Now, there are specific initiations, and these are the ones that are often referred to as initiations that are not like beginning your practice thing, it's like a devotion, right? Those are also initiatory processes because when you take a devotion-based initiation and say take a degree in an occult order or devote yourself fully to a god or dedicate yourself to a path, right? Things like that. You're not doing that as the very first thing you do in your practice, obviously, but that is still an initiation because you're beginning a new chapter, right? It's stepping into the new. And every time you do that, you are initiated. Different ways self-initiations can look if you decide to do one. Now, there are, of course, the ones that look the most like a traditional initiation, and that would be traditions that have created self-initiation curriculum. So there are a lot of occult orders out there that have like released their materials so that people can follow along, particularly the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which very much does not exist anymore. Now, there are some lodges that claim to be Golden Dawn lodges. They are not like continuing that lineage, though they certainly will die on the hill that they are. You still can get growth from those lodges. I'm not saying they're bad or anything, but I'm saying like the Golden Dawn doesn't exist, right? So when the Golden Dawn fell apart because British occultists like to yap at each other and cause drama, basically they published all of their information in this document called the Black Brick. If you look up Golden Dawn book, it'll come up. It's this huge like 50 million page book, right? And all the initiations are in there. And so if you were to become a modern Golden Dawn practitioner and you're not going through a revival lodge, you are going to do that in your house. As well, systems like Enochian. Enochian is an angelic magical tradition that comes from Western esotericism, where you interact with these angels known as the Enochians. It was discovered by John Dee and Edward Kelly, not founded. People can't found spirits. They discovered secrets, right? They were brought into it. And in a sense, that is a self-initiation on its own, right? When they discovered the Enochian angels and interacted with them the first time, and then went through this whole journey of scrying all the Enochian angels. Basically what happened is John Dee, the magician, and Edward Kelly, they were invoking these angels and scrying them. They weren't actually really doing much magic with them. They were basically just trying to understand, to get closer to God, right? If you were to do Enochian work, whether you're doing it in the De-Enochian or Neo-Enochiana, which is a system that was based off their work that kind of evolved to have more practical magic to it, because Dee and Kelly weren't really interested in practical magic, but many people who have interacted with the Enochian angels since have been, hence De-Enochian, Neo-Enochiana being kind of different systems, kind of the same systems. Whichever one of those you go down, you are likely going to do self-initiation. A very famous self-initiation into the Enochian system is scrying the Enochian aethers, where essentially you take the Enochian text of each aether, because there are many of these aethers that were scried when he was interacting with the angels. He saw all these things, right? And if you replicate those, you have interaction with the Enochian angels, and every single one of those, I've actually done these myself, not every single one, I'm moving through them very slowly, has been an initiatory experience, right? You go through it, you read it, and you have that direct interaction, and I find that they are really intense. This is why Enochian I don't recommend as a daily practice. I constantly talk about the value of a daily practice. Don't make Enochian your daily practice, because it's just so much and it is so initiatory. In general, initiation should be spaced. But yeah, like that's a good example. Another system that kind of uses those initiations that you can find online would be Kabbalah. I am of course most versed in Hermetic Kabbalah, which is the Kabbalistic system that is used by Hermeticism. Basically, Kabbalah is a mystic system that was originally a Jewish system, and then a Christian system, and now a Hermetic system, right? And basically, there's a big thing with it called path working, and path working is a potent way to self-initiate, where basically it's kind of like a guided meditation in a sense, right? Like you read the text, you go into the text, you have a mystical experience using the text. And what people will do is they will path work the tree of life. And so within Kabbalah, there's this very famous diagram called the tree of life that shows how God enters the world. It basically starts with a point in a circle, and then it dilutes out through these spheres. And the spheres are basically the layers of existence and the way God interacts. And between those spheres, there are these paths. And so people will do this thing called path working, where they will visualize themselves going through all the paths. And that is a self-initiation technique. Because you are sort of going up that ladder through things you are conduiting yourself. And so that is not going to be ceremonial magic. It's going to be much more in the world of mysticism. In general, mysticism uses a lot of self-initiation, like especially when you look at like the Abrahamic traditions, since Abrahamic occult orders are not really a thing these days, excluding groups like the Opus Dei, who kind of keep to themselves. A lot of Abrahamic mysticism will inherently be something that you kind of self-initiate into. As well, if you are doing pagan traditions that are not like that well documented, you're inherently going to have to self-initiate, because once again, there's no group you can just roll up to. Now, another way self-initiation can work is initiation through dreams and involuntary initiation. So I've been talking so far about initiations that you choose, right? You go out and you're like, okay, well, I want to do Enochian, I want to interact with the Enochian angels, and I'm going to now scry the Enochian aethers to experience the Enochian angels and learn about their mysteries. But the thing is, not all initiations are ones that you take on yourself, right? There's a lot of things that happen to us spiritually that we do not choose, right? In the modern world, we think that we can like choose everything in our lives. And often I think, you see this with dating too, like people think you can like order a pizza in life, right? Like everything's DoorDash. And you can type in like exactly what you want and it'll happen exactly how you want. And spirituality is definitely not that way. I remember I had a really revelatory conversation with someone who was involved in Santeria type stuff. I don't know specifically what variant of Santeria they were part of, but it was a really eye-opening conversation, because they were telling me that before, and if you go into Santeria or any of the ATR type traditions, you have to be initiated by someone else, right? It's not a self-initiation system at all. But basically what happens is you go to these houses of practitioners, and it was interesting how this was explained. Basically, they do a divination on you to find out what spirit actually has anything to do with you. And you cannot worship, venerate, or interact with spirits or gods that are not related to your basically lot. Basically, they have this idea that you were like destined to venerate certain gods, and the priest themselves has to do divination on you to see if the gods have chosen you to be part of that specific house. And often people get rejected and told to go and worship a different god. instead of the one they want to, right? It's like you don't really choose what God you worship. And that's so interesting to me because I think in modern paganism, since it is so eclectic, and my background is in Thelema and modern paganism, right? We are an eclectic community, right? It's a big tech community. People really choose what they want to do with their practice, which is great. But we fail to consider that there are so many things in our practices that we don't choose. And I didn't have this happen to me until quite a bit into my practice, where I actually was at a group ritual and I was spontaneously and involuntarily initiated into a system that I knew nothing about. And it was one of the most puzzling and mind-boggling experiences of my spiritual life because I didn't know what was happening. I was like, what am I seeing? Like I had this really, really intense experience. And it took me a long time to process that. And those spirits actually kept interacting with me after that ritual, right? That was an involuntary initiation. And sometimes these literally happen spontaneously, like completely out of your control. Like I was at a ritual for a completely different goddess. Now, it does make a bit more sense now that I consider that goddess did have some kind of like road opener type correspondences, but I know people who've had involuntary initiations like that many, many times. In a sense, when we look at famous mystical antidotes like Aleister Crowley, right? So Aleister Crowley is the prophet of the religion of Thelema, and the way Thelema was created was actually like a spontaneous possession of his wife at the time. So they were in this pyramid and she just started like saying stuff and he was like, oh, you're trolling me, you're making a little laugh, ha ha ha, funny. And then he started realizing, oh my God, she's saying things she wouldn't know. Like there's no way she would know that. She's not that occulty like I am, you know, she doesn't know as much as me. And he realized very quickly that she was actually having a spiritual possession experience. And then he channeled an entire holy text off this experience and essentially opened up an entire new system of magic that tons of practitioners have chosen to initiate into, right? That was an involuntary initiation. And many times in your spiritual life, this might happen. This will happen spontaneously and out of your control. Now, there are other types of involuntary initiations that happen through things like dreams that are well documented. So when we talk about the sabbatic craft, often known as traditional witchcraft online, though I will say a lot of things are called tradcath or tradcraft, not tradcath. No, we're not a Catholicism channel over here. But we look at tradcraft, right? People talk about that a lot in a lot of different terms, and unfortunately, it has been diluted. Like a lot of people, when they say they're a trad witch, like I don't know what they're talking about. I'm like, okay, so are you doing sabbatic stuff? Are you doing like folk magic from Europe? Like it can mean a lot of different things. But when we're talking about that term in the like classical sense, right? Like the sabbatic mysteries, like leaving your body to commune with the horn god, that whole thing, right? The witch's sabbat. Yeah, the way that you initiate into that is a dream initiation in most cases. Within Cultus Sabbati, one of the big organizations devoted to the sabbatic craft that is near impossible to contact, you actually have to have 3 sequential dreams of the Sabbath before you can even approach that group, right? Like you have to have these dreams repeatedly. And actually, I was looking at entheogenic traditions that relate to psychedelica and magic, and many of them actually recommend against using psychedelics as a ritual conduit until you have 3 dreams of yourself using that psychedelic before anything. So many times if you get specific dreams repeatedly, that can be an initiatory experience. But of course, after a dream initiation, you do have to follow through in the material world and do further initiation. Typically, it's like an initiation before an initiation, right? It's like a sign that you need to do the big initiation, right? Like it's your beginning of path initiation and it's like, okay, now it's time to do the devotion initiation, right? Like it's a beginning of a thing. The most common way you will see self-initiation done, and the method that I'm going to spend the rest of the video discussing, is making your own self-initiation and choosing initiation, right? If you are ready to embark on a spiritual path or change your spiritual path or approach new gods, right? Voluntary self-initiation is the way to go. And I'm going to discuss how to actually formulate a self-initiation ritual, because if you want to start something new in your practice, you should begin with an initiation. Many times people are actually kind of doing initiations, they're just not calling it that. And when I go through the formula of how I would create a self-initiation, you'll understand what I mean. Like many rituals people are doing are kind of that. But to begin, I would like to say the very first step should be divination. I believe you should always be divining everything going on in your practice, because it is a sort of check and balance in a spiritual sense, right? It's telling you like, okay, this is a good idea, this isn't a good idea. Like I really recommend divination and think everyone should be divining. So start with divination. Be like, should I approach the spirit? Does the spirit want anything to do with me? What type of spirit should I work with? What gods are right for me? Am I meant to work with Persephone or Hades? Who knows, right? And you do see this thing online where people talk about like waiting for signs from specific deities, and you get this like whole what deity is reaching out to me conversation, right? That's like the most common question I get is, can you tell me how to know what deity is reaching out for me? And to be honest, you might not have a deity reaching out to you at that time. Sometimes deities do reach out to people and send people signs, like the Morrigan might send a bunch of crows to your house, right? That does happen, but that doesn't always happen. And I don't believe you should put your spiritual journey on hold until that happens, right? If you know you want to worship the gods or invoke angels or whatever it is you want to do with your occult practice, you should do it now. I don't think you should like wait for eternity. So if you are not seeing signs, right, just do divination on what actually makes sense for you. As well, a good thing to do could be look at your astrological natal chart and consider what is well placed and what is poorly placed. That can give you a good insight into your metaphysical constitution and what you can do with your metaphysical constitution. Now, if you do think you are being reached out to by gods, because this does happen, it happens very, very frequently. It just isn't always happening to people, right? Like let's say you've been seeing a bunch of weird signs and the air feels weird and you feel like something's happening. Do divination to clarify what that might be. And then once you start seeing like symbols, say a crow, right? Look up in mythology, what is related to crows? And then see like other people's mystic experiences that they have discussed and written about and compare what you're experiencing to that, because that can give you some really, really good insight and kind of make you understand that what you're having is a legitimate experience and not just you losing it, right? Now, after you know what you want to do, I recommend doing a contemplation period. So there is this idea, and I'm going to rip this from Christianity because I think it's great, called the examination of the conscience. So basically, you take a hard look at yourself and you consider, like, what have I done today? What have I done in the past month? And consider, like, what is virtuous you've been doing, what's not virtuous you've been doing, and just kind of try to understand yourself. The Hermetic axiom, know thyself, is a key part of mysticism, and it's important to always be reflecting on who you are and what you want. Because one of the key parts of a successful spiritual practice is true will, and understanding who we are, and following the path we are meant to follow. So do some heavy discernment on what you want, because the thing is about initiation is permanent, even if it's a minor one. Like initiations are doors that open and they don't close. I remember I was having a conversation at Botanica with someone once, back when I was living in New York, and she's like, you've opened a lot of doors. And I'm like, yes, I have. And I did that because that's what I want with my path, because I want to worship the gods, right? So before you open any doors, consider what you're doing. Now, when you are ready, you need to begin with purification, because when we go throughout our lives, we create energetic imbalances. We develop miasma. We develop diseases of the heart, right? We develop spiritual problems that we need to remedy. And so purification practice is in order. I believe a purification period should begin with banishing. So start with doing like either something as simple as the lesser banishing ritual of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, or something more complex like the headless ritual or steel of Aeon. There also is a way to like do a bunch back to back, like do say, invoke Archangel Michael, and then after that do like the headless ritual and then the steel of Aeon. You can really like stack these like Lego blocks. Put a lot together and banish as much as possible. Get every single thing out of you. Do a self-fumigation. Light the incense, right? Burn it all down, right? And make sure you are as clean as possible going into your initiation so that it's just your soul and your spirit in the best health to be able to undergo that experience. Because as we have physical health, we have a body of light, and that body of light needs to be taken care of too. Now, after this point, you are going to want to begin invocation. So all initiation should be with spirits, right? So what you're going to do is invoke them. Do not evoke. So invoke is calling a spirit into you, and evoking is calling a higher spirit into you to call a spirit outside of you. Now, there might be some initiations where that evocation process is done, but in general, default to invocation with initiatory processes, because we want as much about ourselves to change as possible. And ideally, you are initiating towards spirits and gods that you can trust and that you want in your life and in your practice. So invoke, not evoke. Now, if you are initiating into something that's involving ideas like Goetia, or even like similar like Renaissance grimoire magic, right? If you're looking into the Renaissance grimoire magic traditions, medieval grimoires, that type of world, then perhaps evocation would be involved. But honestly, I would recommend before you do those practices, actually initiating into the higher god that those grimoires call upon, instead of like initiating straight into like the actual spirits you're evoking to do your bidding, right? Start with the high god and then work with the lower ones in those traditions. Now, after that, leave an offering. So offerings and sacrifices are very important. Now, I say offering over sacrifice most of the time because when people hear the word sacrifice, they start freaking out and thinking I'm going to put them in a wicker man. No, just give something that represents the effort you are putting in as a honoring thing to the gods. An offering is not also paying a god to do what you want. So many people misinterpret this and think of spirituality like an ATM. The spiritual ATM is wrong. You are giving an offering as a gesture of devotion, because mysticism, as I believe Frater Occult said this, and it's an awesome quote, mysticism is discipline and devotion coming together. And all of magic should have a layer of mysticism to it. So give some sort of offering. That could be a libation. And a libation is a great offering because you consume it with the spirit, and so there's this back and forth. You could give, say, like a meal you've cooked, nice wine, perfumes, or even more severe offerings like a piece of your hair or something, right? There's a lot of things, and you can also do devotional acts as an offering, such as like getting a tattoo. Obviously, that's pretty extreme. Don't do that for every initiation, but you know what I mean, like devotional things like that, or saying that you'll wear white every Monday, or you know what I mean, like devotional things, or like I will do this many times. I will wake up at 3 a.m. every single day for the next week, right? There are many ways to give offerings and many ways to customize that to what you want. But be aware, the offering you are giving should relate to the spirit you are interacting with, right? If you're invoking and initiating into a Dionysian tradition, maybe give wine, right? Think about what you're doing and make it customized to what makes sense. Now, after this, you should take some sort of oath. The word oath is also a scary word. It basically just means promises that you won't break. And oaths should be about making yourself better. Now, people watch Hollywood movies and think oaths should be like really scary. No, if you were, say, initiating into a Mars-based tradition, your oath could be to always be improving your physical condition and always stand up for yourself and always, you know, I don't know, stuff like that, like things that relate to Mars. They're typically things that should be improving your life, right? Because the goal of a spiritual practice is to make you better and make you get closer to the gods. So they should always be positive things that make your life better. They can also be related to things like trying to help that god's epithet spread throughout the world, or help other people be aware of that god and worship that god. There's a lot of things you can do with that. But every initiation should include some sort of promise to the spirit. Now, after this, you are going to want to thank the spirit and do some sort of gesture of devotion, and really lean into gratitude. Now, after this point, you are going to want to banish. Now, many people think it's weird to banish during an initiation, but the reason why that's incorrect is that you should banish after every single ritual, because banishing is simply asking the spirit to depart. There's a word I read somewhere called the license to depart, and I like that word in these situations, right? You're not doing a whole exorcism style banishing ritual after an initiation. You're doing something simple and soft to just let the spirit know that they are, you know, ready to depart and that the ritual is closed. And then you're going to want to close the ritual and see how it plays out in your life and journal on the synchronicities you experience after the initiation and how your life changes. And I also recommend doing divination on what the effects of that initiation are, and as it unfolds, continuing to analyze the ritual that you did and understand yourself and grow with the spirit. So self-initiation is completely legit. You can do everything you can do in a regular initiation in a self-initiation. Self-initiation is also not hard, right? You're supposed to begin your path of initiation, right? Not do it when you have like a PhD in magic, right? So many people in the metaphysical community think initiation is for experts. No, initiation is by design for the beginner, right? And I will mention this as well. As you develop in your spiritual path, you will go through multiple initiations, right? There are always new phases and new steps to development. There is never a moment when you have completed your spiritual journey until you have united with the gods, which really doesn't happen until you die. So there's always more initiations you can undergo, but just know anyone can initiate. That is like the whole point of it. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Georgina Rose. You can support me on Patreon and get an extra video every month, do mentoring with me, get ritual herbs sent to your house, and ritual guides every month, which are direct instructions on how to do rituals so you can follow along and do some cool magic. As well, I am on Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, Substack, Twitter, and I host the podcast, The Postmodern Iconoclast, which is on this YouTube channel and on most podcasting platforms. I also am doing a group trip to Greece with Trova Trips, so signups for that are below. That'll be really fun. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Please have an amazing day, night, afternoon, mid-morning, mid-evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you subscribe for 93 days, you will not need to meet your holy guardian angel or do any of this work. All right.